right.
Check right now.
All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today. We have a full agenda and a discussion item at the end. Commissioners, today we don't have anything to start us off. No awards, Tonight we'll allow our city manager to say a few words, but we're going to hold that for tonight.
That's an award.
That's right. All right, so let's get started. And with Committee of the Whole, we'll bring this meeting to order, and we'll start with the Audit Wrap-Up 2017, which is a presentation by BDO. All right, and our comptroller is going to come up and tee this up. So Sarah Vanderwerf.
Good morning, Commissioners, and happy belated New Year. I regret that I missed the first meeting of our new year. I've been down with the seasonal stuff off and on, unfortunately. So be well, everybody, as they say at one of our local drugstores. So I am pleased to introduce again our esteemed auditor, John LaFramboise, and I would like to take an opportunity to thank him and his team at BDO for many years of service. As you know, we went out for RFP last year, which is important to do from time to time, particularly when it comes to things like independent audits. So this is their last audit wrap-up for us, at least at this time, and they have given us many years of clean reports, and I am pleased to report that we have another one, and we did receive the Government Finance Officer Association's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence again for the year ending June 30, 2016. A large part of thanks goes out to the team in my department, led by Ruth Leaders, our Deputy Comptroller, and all of the staff there who do all of the heavy lifting on this report. It was another challenging year as we went live with our HR payroll module of the new financial management system. And we got through that, and we got the CAFR done on time again. So I mentioned to them in an email that they are proof positive that computers will never fully replace people, because they did all the work to put this together with the new system. Somebody has to figure that out, and they did. You're probably wondering also about the Citizens Guide, or the popular annual financial report, and that is not quite ready, but we will be bringing that to you soon. So I will let John give you his report, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you.
And if you
Okay, just do the touch screen, thank you. All right, thank you, Sarah. So first, I just want to reiterate what Sarah has said. It's been a wonderful 10 plus years, a great partnership. So, and we appreciate everything that Sarah and Ruth have done over the years. The audits, especially to audit an organization like the City of Grand Rapids, is no small undertaking, and we could not do it without them. So we thank you. So this audit wrap-up document, what I'm going to try and do is just touch on some of the highlights. So this document contains the communications that we as independent auditors are required to have with the city. So we have these required communications take place at the beginning of the audit as well as at the end. So this is just, and again, I'm just going to go over some of the highlights. So if we scroll to, if you're looking, I'm on page 3, the status of our audit. So again, a lot of this is boilerplate information. I'm going to touch on what I think I would want to hear if I was in your position. So first, at the very top, we have completed our audit of financial statements, and we perform our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, what we call GAAS. Many people think of GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles. We also have generally accepted auditing standards that we have to adhere to as auditors. The third bullet point here, as Sarah mentioned, we have issued a clean opinion, or what we call an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and released our reports on December 7th. And also in conjunction with that, we've completed our audit of the federal awards, the CFA as we call it, and we issued an unmodified opinion on that as well. So that's basically saying that you're spending the federal grants that you receive in accordance with the applicable compliance requirements for each of those grants. All right, moving on to the next page, the results of our audit. The only thing I want to mention here is in the middle, the corrected and uncorrected misstatement. So the term misstatement, think of that as an adjusting journal entry, if you will. So if during the course of our audit, if we identify any journal entries that management makes and those are reflected in the CAFR, that's what we would refer to as a corrected misstatement. If during the course of the audit we find an entry that should be made, but maybe after discussion with management and looking at materiality, it's deemed, you know what, it's not material, we're just going to pass on it. We know it's there, but we're okay not recording it. That would be what we call an uncorrected misstatement. So we're required to bring either of those to your attention, and as you can see here, I'm pleased to announce we did not have either of those. So, which basically means the trial balances that roll up into the CAFR that were presented to us at the beginning of the audit, they were closed appropriately, so we didn't find any journal entries to any of those trial balances. So. All right, internal control over financial reporting. So what's on here is just the basic definitions of the different levels of internal control deficiencies. These are, again, just boilerplate for your information. These have not changed for many years. So there are 3 different levels of internal control deficiencies. We are required, if we identify either a significant deficiency or a material weakness in internal control, we're required to bring that to your attention. As you can see here, we did not identify those, and what we put here is that we did not know any material weaknesses. All right, last page I'm going to go over is just some of these other required communications. One I'd like to point out is at the very top there, that there were no significant changes to our planned audit strategy. I really think of everything I tell you, I think that's really important to know, because it tells us that we've been doing the audit for many years. We know how the city operates. We think we know what we're going to find. So based on prior audit results, based on discussions with management during our planning meetings, based on our review of board minutes, all these things that we do during the planning stages of the audit, we really think we know what we're going to find. So, and that's what we present to you during the audit plan communication that we have. So if something were to pop up, right, we call that a surprise in the audit. We don't like those as auditors, because then we have to stop, identify the risk, come up with a proposed audit plan. It can lead to delays in the audit. So that's why I like to tell, when I give these type of presentations, I like to make you aware that we didn't have any changes in our original planning strategy. I just think that's good to know. It tells you that there's no surprises. So, and going down as I'm sure we all expect, we did not have any disagreements with management and no significant difficulties encountered during the audit. So that's really what I wanted to touch on. If there are any questions, more than willing to answer those at this time.
All right. I think we're all used to audits, and we're happy to see that this is a positive one, a clean one, that you didn't have any problems with management is always good to hear.
Right.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, just that it's always good to have no surprises when it comes to an audit. So this is good news. It's probably not the most exciting item that we have on our agendas, but it is exciting to know that we are on solid ground and in good shape and that we have integrity in our processes. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. I know some people may not find this all that exciting, but I can tell you it's probably one of the most important things as a government. So thank you.
Well, if we want to make this presentation more exciting, let me go over the CAFR for a half hour first. Then you'll have a whole nother appreciation for this.
We'll save that for another time.
Okay.
I'm sure if any of the commissioners are interested, they can set up a one-on-one meeting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. Next, commissioners, that will take us to a resolution setting dates for special city commission meetings. And this is for our meeting next week to do another round of interviews with city manager candidates.
Support.
All right. Any questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution authorizing an agreement with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks to build on and maximize current forestry and park operations and public engagement.
Support.
All right, our Parks Director is here to tell us about this.
Sounds enthusiastic. I love it. Good morning, everybody. David Marquardt, Director of Parks and Recreation. I am pleased to be bringing in front of you this morning a resolution offering a contract with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks. As many of you know, at the completion of our Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan, there were a number of priorities that were pointed out in there, but I think the highest priority was recognizing that we cannot do this work on our own, and a strategy for partnerships in order to accomplish much of this work is necessary. So this contract brings us to that point. I think what's unique about this contract is that it offers us the opportunity to work with Friends in a number of different ways, helping out each of the distinct divisions within Parks and Recreation. So we're looking at some tree canopy care with the forestry division, some beautification of river trail planters, looking at the park operations end of things. It's beautifying some garden beds at our city cemeteries, which is an important part of our city's park and open space system. And then advancing public art and community participation with regards to millage projects on an ongoing basis. So looking forward to this work with them and your approval of this resolution.
All right. So commissioners, I'll open it up. I know Commissioner Jones serves as one of our city liaisons with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks. Do you want to add anything?
I believe that it makes all the sense in the world. I think there's an opportunity to operate with greater synergy. We have Friends of GR Parks have a number of volunteers who want to engage, and what better way than to do so in partnership with the city. So.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, and Stephanie is in the audience. Stephanie Adams, CEO of Friends of Grand Rapids Parks. Thank you for your partnership and for your work. Do you want to add anything? Okay.
First of all, I'm just so excited to have this partnership opportunity to continue building our relationship with the Parks and Rec Department. It's been an amazing 11 months that I've been with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, and I'm really excited about the future. I think I've met with almost every city commissioner just to talk about where we're going and the direction we're heading, and really excited about what's next for parks, and I think this just solidifies the direction that we're headed. So I really appreciate all your support, and I'm looking forward to working with David and his entire team, and our entire team is here too to celebrate this partnership.
Great, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, I just don't want to forget the role that Friends played with us throughout the recession when we had virtually no park staff here, and you came alongside your organization, and that was, at the time it was under Steve Faber. And I know there were many of us around this table, maybe in this audience, and certainly in the city, who were spreading chips and painting equipment and doing what we could to keep our parks at least usable through the dark days of the recession. And then we were fortunate to have the residents of Grand Rapids pass the parks millage so that we can not only sustain them, but we've been able to make major improvements. So thank you, Friends of Grand Rapids Parks.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. All right, anything else? I'll call the question then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, and David can stay right up there because now we're talking about Roberto Clemente Park.
Yes, we are.
Which is a real gem in our city. So I was glad to see this come forward. Can I get a motion for this resolution scheduling a public hearing to consider the submittal of a grant application for the renovation of Clemente Park?
So moved.
Support. All right.
Great. So a little bit of background. This is Roberto Clemente Park in Ward 1, very close to Ward 3. I'm surprised
gonna
Bonner
say, it's
doesn't
kind
kind
of
of
on
jog
the-
around there a little differently.
Reclaims it, but.
Yes, yes. Yeah. This is a really distinct project, one in which we are looking at not only park improvements, but we're looking at green infrastructure improvements in this park in coordination with the Department of Environmental Services. They approached us a few years ago in anticipation of wanting to use some of the parkland for underground water storage and stormwater control. I said yes, but let's do it in a way where we are educating our public and building in some play opportunity as a part of this work. And so we are doing that and anticipating an approximately $1.5 million total project. 1.2 of which would be split roughly $900,000 through environmental services, $300,000 of Parks Millage project funding. And then this project is anticipating a $300,000 grant request to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources to support that total $1.5 million project. So, with that grant request, we are required to host a public hearing, which we would like to do on February 20th, and to bring together some of those voices that we've been listening to and hearing in our community meetings so far, and that we will be continuing through the spring and summer of this coming year. And that's really kind of the background.
All right. Commissioners, questions? David, my only question is, are there other applications we're going to put in for MDNR Trust Fund dollars?
We are putting in one additional application, this one and one for Riverside Park, where we're looking at putting in an accessible kayak launch up in Riverside Park.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next, that will take us to a resolution. Let's see, authoring the city, oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Should stay on the right agenda. This is a resolution of scheduling a public hearing on the Uptown Business Improvement District Plan.
So moved.
Support?
All right.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
What you have before you today is a resolution setting Tuesday, February 20th at 7 p.m., the evening commission meeting, as a date for when the City Commission would hold a public hearing to take comment on the proposed fiscal year 2019 Uptown Business Improvement District Plan. You'll see that it's also attached in the with this resolution for you to review. This was going to be a request for its sixth year, not its fifth, and to continue the operations that have kind of produced a lot of valuable results in the Uptown District. This basic current assessment is going to basically remain the same as before. The formula hasn't really changed at all. And this was a plan that was reviewed by the Uptown Business Improvement District on January 3rd of this year, and was recommended for approval. It was also presented to the Economic Development Project team on January 9th. And so basically this is the next step in that process to give formal comment and feedback from the property owners and business owners in that district to kind of review this plan. This is also going to be a plan that's going to be posted on our website for the public to also view. So, yeah. And then also just for your further reference, just in kind of just following what the process is going to be at the end of the overall packet or inside this in the attachment is going to be you'll find the overall schedule for the rest of the plan and getting it approved.
Great. All right, Commissioners, questions? All right, so we have Commissioner Jones, the outgoing member of the Uptown Bid Board, and Commissioner Allen, the incoming. So either of you want to make any comments?
Well, since I haven't been to a meeting yet, I'm going to be kind of disingenuous for me to say something. It's going great. Approve
It's
it.
a great plan.
Approve it. I can come in and say, hey, I got this approved.
Going on a high note. Well, thanks for teeing it up
Absolutely. Pleasure.
and punting it over to your colleague. All right. So with that, I'll call the question again. This public hearing will be on February 20th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving an industrial facilities exemption certificate for Swift Printing and Communications at 400404 Bridge Street Northwest.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Kara Wood.
Good morning. This is a resolution to consider the approval of a 12-year tax exemption for Swift Printing. They're planning to acquire and install a new printing press, and as a result of that, they would be investing $1.7 million in both the real property improvements and the equipment. They will be employing 2 new full-time employees as a result of this investment in our city.
Great. And so, Commissioners, we've heard about this project a couple times. We had a public hearing. Any questions or comments about it? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right. Next, that will take us to, and Carrie, you can just stay up here for a while. That will take us to a resolution approving a development and reimbursement agreement with Jackson Entertainment LLC at Parking Area 5 and a portion of Parking Area 4. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
This is the final step in the local approval for the Brownfield tax increment financing package for this project. This agreement was approved by the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority on January 17th. And the attached agreement in your packet needs to be approved by the City Commission as the city is a party to the agreement and expects to receive reimbursement for the costs for constructing the new Ottawa Avenue, as well as other public infrastructure investment costs related to this project. The tax increment finance agreement indicates that the Brownfield Authority will retain the first 10% of tax increment for administration, and thereafter the developer will receive the first $2 million of TIF reimbursement over the first 4 years. Then once the developer has received that initial $2 million, then the city and the developer will split the annual reimbursement in the pro rata share of eligible costs, currently estimated to be approximately 10% to the city and 90% to the developer based on when we think those eligible activities will occur. So using those projections, the city would receive approximately $1.7 million and the developer would receive approximately $18 million. And it's expected that the developer, unfortunately, will not be fully reimbursed for all their eligible activities, but we're doing the best we can with the projections we have, and should the projections come in higher, they could be potentially reimbursed more.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Kara, can you remind me what's the duration of the TIF? Yeah.
So the TIF is a 25-year period of time.
So that amount that the city would receive is over 25 years, the 1.7 million?
Approximately, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Commissioners, we should point out, because this has been talked about a lot, that this project has 910 parking spaces. 300 of them will be leased by the City of Grand Rapids. And again, hopefully will help with the current struggles we're having downtown with parking.
That's a good point to that.
Yes.
And in addition, I suppose we should point out again that this is one of the largest investments we've had in quite some time.
It is
And
the single largest public-private partnership that we've ever worked on.
Yeah. All right, Commissioner?
Well, and I can't fail to recognize that there will be some residential units that are not market rate. No, they're not LIHTC supported, but they are hitting that ALICE, that Asset Limited Income Constrained group that we also would like to note needs housing and that we'd like to accommodate. So
Yeah.
that's another plus.
Another, in my opinion, exciting opportunity with this project is that we'll be working with them, with DGRI, to look at the possibility of having incubator space for minority and women-owned businesses. So that is a conversation that will continue with DGRI, as well as the piazza, which will be used for a lot of public gatherings.
Yes.
So. All right. Any other questions or comments, Commissioner?
Well, I think it's also important to note that this is I know there's been some chatter about the $26 million TIFA, that this is a reimbursement, that they're going to spend money to improve a site and get paid back some of the money. So this isn't money that we're giving away. This is money that someone is spending to create jobs, to create parking, to create new investment in our city, and we get paid back some of that money, and they get paid back some of the money for the investment they're making. So
Yeah, that's a really good point to make. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. This isn't money we have available today that we're paying.
We're giving to
This is
anyone.
over time, the increment that's created. Commissioner?
Actually, Commissioner O'Connor took part of what I was going to say, but I want to expand that comment a little bit further. Again, the chatter about, it is a startling number, so we owe it to the community to explain that.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
explain
absolutely.
it well. So currently, on that site, there are no income taxes generated, no property taxes generated,
Zero.
and no jobs. None. There are no housing. So the developers come and said, we're going to invest $110 million. So we're saying, okay, we're going to partner with you, and as you pay these future property taxes, we're going to reimburse you for these upfront costs, which is a significant investment to create jobs, to create tax base, to create. It's not a. It's really hard to understand these. This is really complicated. This is the rocket science of development. But I think the general public just seems to think, as Commissioner O'Connor said, we're just writing a check. We're not. It's currently generating nothing. Nothing. So, and we're partnering with the developer to allow them to finance future payments that they're going to make to the city. So.
Thank you for, I think that's an important point that we need to make anytime that we approve a TIF. Commissioner?
Yeah, and I'd also like to comment on the piazza and the importance of public space to our community, because I don't want, and I think many of us do not want a city that has gated communities and separates us further.
Yeah.
So that's why the investment in public space, whether it be parks or piazza, I think is important so that everybody feels welcome downtown. It brought to mind for me the conversations that we had around the table about that land next to I-96, that rather than putting another river house on it, we kept that to be park land so that everybody has access to the river and watching the kayaking and enjoying it. I'll never forget the woman who came up and said, I really don't understand this project. I'm looking at the maps. I just hope that I can go there and enjoy it. And so I think that having that investment as well in this project is really important, that everybody feels welcome downtown and enjoys the theater and enjoys the coffee, can live there hopefully, less expensively, at least in some cases. And hopefully will also generate some jobs for women and minorities out of the incubator. So I think this is an important project.
Yeah. Well, and we should point out too, and I think several of you around this table were with me when we attended the charrettes about South Arena, right? And there were multiple community meetings, a lot of conversation about what people envision for the space, including Area 4 and 5. And this project is pretty consistent with what we heard from the community on what they would like to see. So. All right. With that, any other questions or comments? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution modifying the City Commission Policy 900-45 under Neighborhood Enterprise Zones, or NEZ. And this is recommendation number 4 that came out of the Housing Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Kara?
We're back here with recommendation number 4, modifications to the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone policy to establish baseline qualification criteria, reduce the standard term of the NEZ exemption, and modify the city investment criteria to focus on the highest priority criteria, that being affordable housing. So what you have in front of you is the policy for consideration. We did hold a public hearing, and as a result of discussion at Committee of the Whole when this was first presented, there have been really no changes to the policy since it was drafted.
Great. Thank you. All right, Commissioners, this is one we've talked about for quite some time. Any questions or comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, we have probably all received a letter from, or several letters perhaps, from residents. Could you talk about how we define affordable housing, Kara, in this policy?
In this policy, we talk about affordable housing being at least 20% of the units in a given project being available to families or individuals earning less than 80% of area median income.
Okay.
And that is on page 7 of the policy under the category affordable housing.
Okay.
And that is consistent with what we've talked about in the past.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner?
Kira, we, during the public hearing on the 9th, we did hear some feedback on the NEZ policy. Can you share a summary of what we heard, and if speak to whether it's already in the policy? I think the question about defining affordability was one question, but I'm looking at my notes and looking at my packet at the same time. Do you recall what the summary of those comments were regarding NEZ?
Sure. So a couple of comments were made about the number of years a development could accumulate in terms of different aspects of evaluation. So the base level of support is a 9-year exemption, and there was discussion about whether or not you should be able to achieve the full 15 years without doing affordable housing. And we do allow that option, but there was some discussion and interest in having it only allowable if there was affordable housing as part of the project.
Okay. And that was about it for NEZ? Okay. So can we have conversation about that, Mayor, the commission, to kind of talk through that?
Yes. All right. Thoughts on that?
It's on page 7 if you're looking at the housing packet.
All right, Commissioner O'Connor?
Yeah, so thank you, Kara, for all your work on this. I think it's important to note, first of all, that the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone program is designed to provide support to create something that currently does not exist. And so if we talk about housing, we've talked about housing a lot, that we need more housing at every price point. Oftentimes, the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone, I think, is a tool that is utilized in our neighborhoods, in places where we haven't seen a lot of housing investment made. And so this is one of the small tools that we have to incentivize folks to build residential properties. If you look where a lot of the housing that's been built in our city is mostly in the core city, in our downtown and our near downtown neighborhoods. And if you look at the cost of land in a majority of those places, it's some of the highest in our region. And so to use an NEZ tool allows some of our next tier neighborhoods, our neighborhood business districts, to be competitive on just baseline rent. The cost of construction is the same no matter where you build it. And so having that NEZ tool, even if it only creates market rate properties with a 9-year exemption, allows those small projects in our neighborhood, those infill projects, to be competitive with where they are at. You know, you can't command as high a rent in a neighborhood business district as you might be able to command downtown. All that being said, I think we've worked well to establish some criteria that have incentives in the limited incentives that we have available to promote some other activities, be it affordable housing in some capacity or the utilization of micro-local business enterprises to create jobs and create wealth building opportunities, to the one about enhancing mobility, that if it's built along a transit corridor and you build a bus stop, which makes that a more attractive opportunity. So I think we're looking at ways to build other values from affordable housing. Isn't the only value that we hold as a community when it comes to housing, but it's saying you get the biggest benefit if you build affordable housing, but we all know that to build affordable housing requires the most subsidy, therefore it has the highest term and or highest number of years that you're able to qualify for. So I feel very strongly that the criteria that we put in place are really good criteria, because again, it is very difficult to build affordable housing, and we have some really creative people out there trying to do things, but it's not always possible. But if we're doing some other things that have real significant benefits to our neighborhoods and our neighborhood business districts, I think those are equally good goals for us to have, whether that's enhancing mobility or building something that doesn't currently exist or utilizing micro-local businesses. Those are other things that I think we hold as core values of things that are beneficial to the long-term success of our community and our neighborhoods.
I think those are valid points. And Kira, remind me, it seems like the change that we made maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, it was probably after Great Housing Strategies. We had all of the enhancements at the same level. And so the change that we've made to this proposal is you get even more years if you do affordable housing. So that's the piece that we kind of need to highlight. As you were talking, it reminded me of that. I actually had forgotten, but we're saying if you want to get more years, you can do that, but having affordable housing is where you need to be.
Exactly. So it's very clear here that the affordable housing aspect is the highest priority, but you still have the flexibility of doing other things to achieve additional years.
And then do we believe that based on this, I don't know how many projects, and you may or may not have done the research, but how many projects will be impacted based on past projects, on this? Would we see a result of more affordable affordable housing based on this formula?
I would think that you would, yes.
Okay.
This is a substantial incentive for them to include 20% of the units to be affordable.
Okay.
And Commissioner, we should point out too, maybe Carrie, you can speak to this. Other changes we made is that we took off some of the other incentives,
Yeah, they were
like
kind of
stormwater
easy,
and environmental, and really trying to hone in on what are the core things that we're trying to incent. And it is this balance, and we talked about this a little bit in Economic Development Project Team. Part of the solution is increasing the number of units, so we want across the board. And we know, in fact, a great article just came out about Seattle talking about how they're starting to see a plateau in their rental property prices, or rental unit, and a lot of that is because they have more supply. And so we know that supply is a piece of this equation, and so this allows us to still incent the building of more rental units, but also very clearly incent affordable housing, housing diversity, and mobility in MLB.
And is the baseline, the 9 years, is that a change too?
Yes,
Yeah.
we
What was it
decreased
before?
it.
Yeah, it was 15, it was 12, that's right, now it's 9. So I think this is a really good balance of trying to, and I think we can do exactly what we've done with the change in the past, is just kind of look at that,
Yep.
see if we're getting where we want to go. We didn't see that the last time, so we put this in place and see if we're getting what we're looking for.
We will definitely check in on an annual basis and report back to Economic Development Project Team.
That's an excellent point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Allen?
Just, Kara mentioned 80% of area median income is the, and so there continues to also be a lot of debate over 80% versus 60%. How do we determine affordable housing? And I think we need to really hone in on our language. So some of the benchmarks that we use here in this, that we've adopted, that the Great Housing Strategy has adopted, is that a person should not pay more than 30% of their annual income for housing. So whether you make 30% of area median income or 100% of area median income, affordability to you is you shouldn't have to pay more than 30%. Otherwise, you're considered in the industry housing burdened. So, or house poor, right? Sure. So, in the context of 80% area median income for a single person, that's $35,000 a year. For family of a household of two, it's $41,000. Just to kind of give people a context as to who we're talking about. We're not talking about people making tons of money. Statistics show that if you look at the average rent for a two-bedroom house in our city right now, you need to make $30,000 a year just to afford it. That's the baseline. So we're talking about housing for pretty much, a pretty broad swath of people that is much needed. So I don't want to discount 80% AMI as not being affordable. It's a complex issue, and there's been a lot of drive for us to define affordability, and I think we've actually been pretty clear. It's a person shouldn't pay more than 30% of their annual income for their housing. That's affordable.
Yeah, and Commissioner, we may want to start including that every time we say 80% AMI. Perhaps we should break that down into, we should just have a very simple chart that says, I know,
I pull it up every time.
I know, I know it exists because we've all seen it. It's embedded in a lot of the other documents that we have. I think moving forward, we should just embed that right into the resolution. Every time we say 80% AMI, very clearly explain what that means.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Commissioner Kelly?
Yeah, I think too what we're hearing a lot of is the concern, a very valid concern, of caring for those who make less. But I think it's important to distinguish that the fact that this is not a LIHTC project necessarily, and it's that kind of large millions of dollars that could eat up in our entire general fund that it would take to provide that. And that we are seeing, and we ought to be reporting out every time we just got 3 more awards in the city, so that people are aware, if we could update somehow, maybe on our website, all of these LIHTC credits that we are getting now in the city for these projects that will provide for that income bracket, because that's very important. In terms of this, I really like the directions we're heading because we didn't make any traction really before with affordable housing. It's still a bit of a shot in the dark, and we're going to have to review it annually. I would actually really like to keep our eye on housing type diversity and micro business contracting, and hopefully we'll make some headway that way, because that again gets to jobs for people. But I think we need to keep our eyes on those and see if we're making any traction with it. I'm happy to see the mobility, because we've all heard that if you don't include transit, that's another huge piece of affordable housing, that you have access to jobs. So starting at 9 years, we've heard, requests to drop it to 8. It's pretty nebulous to see what's going to work. And right now, construction costs are extremely high. Supply, the other thing I want to say is supply and increased density does not always guarantee affordability. That said, we are hearing, and we're hearing from people who are landlords, that the market is softening a bit. And so when they're saying slow down on the development, I think those who are all about affordable housing would want to say, no, let's speed up on development, because we want to continue to see a little more supply out there to lower the prices just generally in the market. So, none of us have a crystal ball. I think that this is a good start, but I would like to review it before a year is out, at least get some numbers on who's taking us up on these, because we could always make a switch mid-year. If we see a lot of development happening and we get some sense, maybe we can tweak it a little bit. But certainly an annual review would be, I think, part of every single one of these policies, and a reporting out to see how we're doing and what we can add or subtract to everything. So thank you for this work.
Well, and I think the other thing, Kara, after today, my hope is that you're thinking about how do we get the word out about this to all of our partners in the community, so that they're well aware of this as a potential tool. So I trust that that's being done.
We will make sure that happens.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, with that, I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right. Next, Greg, are you clapping over there? I know this is, this was on your list.
Yeah.
This was one of the things.
That's officially the first one.
Right, and we appreciate that.
All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving a new City Commission Policy 900-55 entitled Voluntary Equitable Development Agreements, or VEDA. And this is recommendation number 5 from the Housing Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Kira?
All right, this one was first introduced back in November, and a public hearing was held at your last commission meeting. This policy would provide for 3-party agreements between an investor, the city, and a community-based organization that would allow the partners to commit to various goals and joint interests related to development projects. In this policy, these agreements would allow for community involvement through a process driven by the needs of the community. Prior to the public hearing, there was a modification made under property eligibility to allow that all private development on city-owned property or public or private projects with total project costs in excess of $10 million, or any public or private project seeking investment from the city's Affordable Housing Fund, be eligible to utilize this policy. At the time of the public hearing, there wasn't any, there was some research provided in terms of how many projects we have over $10 million in any given year, and between $5 and $10 million in the locations of those projects. So that information was provided to you, but we didn't get any indication of firm direction if you wanted to modify that. So that is something that we would like you to discuss today and make a determination on. In addition, I think there was one other, nope, that was the only change as a result of the introduction and the public hearing. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, but that is one outstanding issue that we need to resolve today.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Allen?
This is one I struggled with at the last meeting, and I'm still struggling with. So explain it to me. Project eligibility and the use of the word voluntary agreement. So is it voluntary or is it not voluntary?
It is voluntary.
So in other words, if a developer is doing private development on city-owned property, they're not required to enter into a VEDA. They may enter into a VEDA.
Exactly.
And all
legally, we cannot require these types of agreement.
So then why did we require Grand Valley to follow a process similar to this when we had to
I don't know that we actually required them to.
It was
voluntary.
It was an MOU that they voluntarily agreed to through a negotiation process with the city and the neighborhood.
So, and I'm fine with that. So then my ultimate question is, why would a developer do this?
So we responded to that question during the public hearing also, and it is because in most cases with these incentives, we need the neighborhood to be a partner in the development process. And in order to gain that, in some cases, they need to agree on certain things. And so this provides that forum where they can meet with the city and the developer and talk about their concerns or interests in the project and come together to form a partnership with the city in seeing that development forward.
So, and I hate to belabor this point.
No,
So
it's okay. It's a good question.
So in the NEZ process that we just adopted, there is a requirement for an NEZ that they do have to work with a neighborhood association, or if there's not. So then in that situation with an NEZ, then could that developer choose to use a VEDA to help guide that process?
Exactly, right.
I would think that I've struggled with the NEZ requirement of them working with a neighborhood association, and I think that I know you will do this, but it would seem to me that to strongly encourage the developer to use this because it really helps guide the process, as opposed to just, because what's happening now is developers are coming and they're meeting with neighborhood associations, they might meet with the staff and they might meet with the board and then they throw all these terms and they show all these flashy, these are folks that don't necessarily have any background in development, and no offense, but a good savvy developer can roll right over it. And I'm not discounting the neighborhood association. They do what they do best, which is organizing neighbors and block clubs and crime prevention, all that kind of stuff. They're not developers. So I think these two then go hand in hand. So in the case of an NEZ, I can definitely see that.
It's very likely that this VEDA could be used in conjunction with any of the economic development incentives, whether it's brownfield redevelopment, tax abatements. It's really going to depend on the size and scale of the project because of the impact it would have on any given neighborhood.
And then my last point is, additionally, I'm kind of getting to the answer to my own question of why would they do this. Additionally, the way our planning and zoning works is that a major development is almost always going to require some kind of a zoning variance. We are going to start seeing development at the neighborhood level more and more. So what we're doing then is we're offering a tool to help guide those processes, because you cannot do a major zoning variance without first meeting with the neighbors and getting that. So again, we're providing that framework.
Exactly.
Based on the experience that we have, and so I'm comfortable with this now, understanding why. So what we're doing is not providing a requirement, we're providing a tool by doing this.
An
and I think that's a key delineation to make.
And Commissioner, I think thinking about other possibilities, and again, we talked about this a little bit last time, that this is really a tool we don't have right now. But when I think about how this could be used, I think about all of the other public entities in this city that don't pay property tax. And it would be a tool to work with them. I mean, I think of even some of the nonprofit public entities that are doing developments in neighborhoods. I mean, this could be a tool that we could use as a template for their partnership with the neighborhood. And so thinking about it broader.
It's not just intended for private developers.
Right.
Public, nonprofit, certainly.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'll go with Commissioner Lanier, then Kelly.
Okay, so then, is there a way then, if this is approved, to use VEDA in the other policies, as opposed to saying agreements with the community? Because I think it'll hold more weight. Otherwise, I wouldn't go and pluck this out if I were a developer on my own. And yeah, someone may recommend it, but I wonder if we use this language and embed it inside the other policies, like the NEZ policy we just approved, then it will probably become a tool that will be used more frequently. That really wasn't why I had my hand raised, but as that other conversation unfolded, I thought about that.
The language would be such as, but not limited to, a VEDA.
The VEDA, yeah, exactly. So we'd have to go back if we wanted to make that adjustment. But so under property eligibility, thank you, Kara, for changing the language to or, because I think the way it was written when we talked about it back in December, it appeared as though you had to meet all of those criteria. There was one other question. So I think the other distinction too from the public comment, people wanted us to lower the threshold to, I think someone even said $300,000, but I think, helping the public to understand what types of projects would qualify, that is very likely $10 million would be kind of the threshold. I think you spoke to maybe 6 or 7 projects in recent history would qualify, and And they're the ones that people are most concerned about, as opposed to 300,000 is Dave Allen's house, so. I have to pick on you.
I don't own a house.
So, you know,
when
just to
looking
kind of
at
help
this-
people to understand the difference between 300,000.
When looking at this, we looked at the portfolio of projects that we've dealt with over the last 5 years, and we were really looking at projects that had a major impact on neighborhoods specifically. And $10 million seemed to be a threshold where we had about 5 to 6 of those on average per year, which is somewhat manageable by staff because know that these agreements are very difficult to implement. It takes numerous neighborhood meetings, a lot of negotiation. You've got legal fees and costs associated with drafting that agreement and getting all parties to agree. So that was another consideration in terms of our ability for existing staff to perform the duties on about 6 of those per year.
I'm going to go to Commissioner Kelly and then Commissioner Jones, then O'Connor. Commissioner?
Okay, so I think that this could be very cutting edge, but what I'm feeling about it is, number one, I want this to happen. I'm just not sure this is the right time yet, that we've fleshed it out enough. We've been getting questions from community members. What does this mean? I'm not sure if I can support it until I understand it better. I'm thinking that if we really want robust community engagement, we need to do some training up front, for example. I know that we are going to start having training in planning and zoning for new planning commissioners, and I'm going to take it as well. We've been invited commissioners, but I think we also need to train our folks at Seeds of Promise and some of the neighborhood associations and open that up, because in order to comment intelligently on planning and zoning, you've got to understand it. And also some information around design and what are design guidelines. I know that there was a neighborhood group that met at ICCF and did their own workshop on that once, and it was really, really helpful. But we need to provide that, I think. So there's that. I like this too because, Greg, I know that you were the one, and I give you credit for talking about this, kind of like what we've seen with LEED certification. So what we're trying to get is that people will adopt this, and initially, why would anybody do LEED? It costs money to get silver, platinum, and gold. But now it's become an honorable thing to do, and people actually, pay fees to get their LEED certification. So I'm hoping that in Grand Rapids, we can be a first in creating an equitable certification. And I believe that we can get that done. And that Grand Valley's MOU, which granted it took a lot of staff time for a couple of reasons. One, just to get to the point where we'd even talk about an MOU, and then to do it. But I do think we have to recognize that we don't yet know the cost to the city. Does it mean that we have to add another position in the Economic Development Department? And then are you willing to do that?
So I'll step back for that one.
I can speak for 2 of the 3 on this end.
Right. So I think we need to have more information on this about the levels and then how much time it would take and what that would cost realistically, and then where would that cost be? Would it be reimbursed from by adding a staff person to a department, or would that come in from the fund that we're setting up, because this is related to housing? So I'm very excited about this. I think that we need to also then figure out a way to recognize. Is that the Mayor Hicks Gold Star? Is that, do we put it on our website, which I think we should, so that it's transparent, because we don't have enforcement teeth. And that's expensive to do over 15, 20 years as well. But to hold people accountable and recognize them at the same time, I think could be done through our website. And so anyway, I just think that we ought to hold off on this a little bit and maybe even have a workshop so that for staff's sake, they can present to us and we can clarify what we're thinking and get more feedback from the community. Maybe even a public hearing on what do you think could be part of Aveda. When you talk about nonprofits, I think, why wouldn't we give credit for a group that added childcare in their facility, for example? I think we've just started opening the door to this, and we haven't figured it all out yet.
Yeah. So just a couple of things, Commissioner, that you brought up. One, I want to make sure, and I know most of us are aware of this, that piece around providing support and education and training at the neighborhood level has already started. So I believe Stacy calls it Citizen Labs, I think is the name of it. But we approved to partner with Dorothy the Dorothy Johnson Foundation. So my understanding is that there are 27 community members who are participating in this multi-session training process, and it's really specific, and I know that planning and development are a part of that training
good.
process. I should get the details, or maybe we can ask Stacy to send out the details of that to the full commission.
Sure.
And then Commissioner, one thing, and I'll go to Commissioner Jones and then O'Connor. We did talk about that a little bit in our economic development project team about, this is a template, and we know that some additional details still need to be fleshed out, but giving staff the go-ahead to start working through those details would be helpful. And then some of it is kind of the unknown, right? Until we have the first project. Some of it, because it is new, some of that is just going to be a learning process and an iterative process, and we may need to make changes in the future. So just to let you know that conversation was had, and Kara can probably weigh in on that too.
Sure.
And then Commissioner Jones.
So to the question about capacity, and we did calculate a fee that would be paid by the developer, so the city wouldn't bear any costs for the work that needs to be done as it relates to these agreements. And so, anticipating approximately 6 of these a year, the fee would cover the cost, and we could use existing staff. Now, if that grew beyond that 6 number, we might have to consider a little bit of capacity in that area.
Okay, that's good to know.
Commissioner Jones?
Yep, I just wanted to state that I'm in agreement with my colleague, with Commissioner Kelly, about looking at this as a real opportunity to perhaps engage in a more innovative way, to really put some teeth to this. I too, Commissioner Allen, struggle with the word volunteer, but I think in some ways it's no different than that of those developers who decide to go after the LEED certification. There's no, they don't have to. They choose to. There's a price to pay, and to your point, Commissioner Kelly, there was a time, I remember early on in construction, people were like, I'm not spending that kind of money to be recognized for having a more economic or a more environmentally friendly building. And now everybody and their mother wants to be LEED certified. And so, why not follow that recipe? And I'm even open to finding ways to further incentivize developers who will sign on to this, who will make it a point to engage residents in a way that perhaps they've strayed away from or don't want to do, because I think quite often the perception is the residents will either weigh things down, slow things down, and are coming to the table with a lack of knowledge as to all of the details of what it means to develop property. And to Commissioner Kelly's point, any opportunity we can provide to further educate our citizenry of what it takes, I think is a benefit. But I mean, why not, again, take the opportunity to add more teeth to it and make it something that ultimately developers and others see the benefit of it and say, you know what, I want to have a VITA certified project. So again, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Kelly about the need to perhaps take a deeper look into this and perhaps even delay in approving it as is. So that's my suggestion.
So supportive of it in concept, want to take a
Very much
deeper
so.
dive into the details and maybe even strengthen the language.
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner?
So I agree with both Commissioner Kelly and Jones regarding, the enhancements that potentially could be in this policy. But I also see the urgency of getting something on the books so that we can actually push back on whatever it is, because it's implemented and we'll be able to see better what the enhancements should be. I think, we've talked about this for quite some time, and I think there's urgency in making sure that the community has a formal way of being involved in a process. And I think, as the process is unfolding, staff will probably likely talk about, here are some hiccups. These are the things we're seeing, or here are some enhancements based on what we're consistently hearing from the community. And so I'd like to move forward with the policy as it's written, and then, make sure we're monitoring that and making enhancements as we go. I mean, nothing would stop us from making a change even in a month if, there's a flood of VITAs that are drafted and need some modification. So if you guys would join with that, especially since we know that staff has the capacity to handle, you know, what they believe is going to be the quantity based on past projects, then I think great.
I have an idea, but let me first get Commissioner O'Connor.
Yeah, I struggle with this one all the way around. I think this was one of the recommendations from the Affordable Housing Committee to promote affordability. And so I appreciate that you put a threshold in there of, say, $10 million, because that's a project that has the possibility of having a pretty significant impact on wherever that $10 million investment is made.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about a $600,000 project, that's a 3,000 square foot building. That is not a project that I think in most circumstances has a possibility of having a significant impact on the surrounding land uses or the scope or scale of a neighborhood. And so if the goal is affordability, requiring someone to then go through a pretty intensive process. Again, if you're going to do a project, it's sort of, I think, from my opinion, some of the test of if you're a good community partner or not. So you're going to do the things proactively to notify you the neighborhood around you, to say, hey, I'm going to be a good partner with you as I build my $600,000, 3,000 square foot building. But to then mandate that you have to go through this big intensive process, it's pretty self-defeating for us to say you have to go through this process. It's only going to have a negative impact on the ultimate affordability of that project. So I think it's trying to strike that balance of, you know, if you're going to build a $10 million project, you're probably building some contingency into your financial plan to do that sort of community engagement that's necessary. You probably have someone that's part of your team that's already contracted to do those type of engagement meetings. You probably have you already have a large architectural firm that's going to build some of that contingency into their architectural budget. Like you're gonna have those things built in. If you're talking someone that's going to build a small building, like adding those layers, it only further exacerbates those costs at the smaller scale you go. So I just want to be mindful of that. If the goal of having a policy like this was part of the discussion around affordability, I just don't want it to be self-defeating.
So 10 million, are you saying?
I'm okay with 10 million because I feel like a $10 million project is a large enough project that it, you know, the professionals doing that sort of work have that sort of capacity built into their organization already, and that's something they're probably, for the most part, do in some capacity is a course of their regular business.
So I have a couple thoughts. One is, I think everyone has really good points. I don't necessarily, I agree with Commissioner Lerner. I think we can move forward on this as a framework, and then three of you potentially can meet with the economic development team and talk about, take a deeper dive and identify areas that potentially we could amend at a later date, or that we maybe want to go out and get additional feedback on, or work with community, or talk additionally to potential developers. And then maybe even take a look at what projects in the past this could have been used on, so that we can think proactively. Many of us know about potential developments that are, being talked about right now. Even thinking about, is this a tool that potentially could be used? Like I think of even the project on Wealthy Street, right? I mean, what a beautiful example of working with the community to be very intentional about wanting to have a positive impact on that neighborhood. I think this potentially could have been a tool that was used, and maybe even additional incentives identified to support that commitment. So again, I that's what I'm inclined to do, and I guess I'll defer to Kara and your additional thoughts on that, if we can find some common ground here, maybe some middle ground to do both, which I think we can because we're creative.
One quick question, Kara, in your time of research, wondering can you recall the number of projects that we've done over the years that were between the $5 and $10 million?
Yeah, what was that spreadsheet?
It was right around 30 projects.
Over how many years?
Over 5 years.
Between 5 and 10 million. Okay. Might I suggest that be a range? Or do we just stick with the 10 million? I'd much rather see a range. I say that because when you look at neighborhood development, correct me if I'm wrong, to what degree are we going to have within the neighborhoods developments that are at the $10 million level. I would think that they're going to be more, they're going to be less than $10 million. That could also be just as impactful.
Really?
Depending on where they're at, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all location specific for the
Yeah.
most
Was it
part.
Carlton and Fulton? How much was that project?
That one, I believe, was very close to 10 million, if not just over 10 million. It was
That's
nine,
the one I think,
nine-ish.
I mean, and that was very much a partnership with the neighborhood and came after.
You're trying to lower it to 5, am I
I'm
understanding
trying to
that
find a
correctly?
lower range because I also go back to the fact that when you consider neighborhoods throughout our city, there are obviously more neighborhoods that are better organized than others. And so I'm looking at authentic engagement, which is what a lot of the existing, more long-standing neighborhood associations do in their sleep. But there are some that are either currently developing or
Yeah.
underdeveloped who don't really engage in any authentic community engagement.
Yeah, that's a good point. Commissioner Allen?
Five.
Several things real quick. I really hope that we can move forward this at least as it's presented right now with hope of, because I've actually been in some conversations with some developers that are interested in using this. So this is important for me in the conversations that I'm having. I fully support lowering it to $5 million. Case in point, the Uptown Village, which is the low-income housing tax credit project on the corner of Diamond and Wealthy, was about $5.5 million.
Oh, okay.
Completely changed that neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's
So
only 5.5 million?
Yeah. But that was back then.
That's true. I know, but
I'm just
yeah,
suggesting-
That went up significantly, yeah.
I'm just suggesting.
That's a beautiful project.
I'm just
That's one of my
suggesting, all I'm suggesting is that in the world of low-income housing tax credits, having a VEDA in place would really help the scoring criteria for a project like that. But lowering it below $10 million, because most of the low-income housing tax credit projects we've seen have been below the $10 million threshold.
That's a good, I had not
So
thought.
all I'm suggesting is, so I'm saying two things. I'm saying I really hope we can move forward with this as it's written with the hope of making changes. And the second thing is, I'd like to lower the threshold to $5 million.
Okay, do you want to make that amendment, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay, so amendments on the table to lower the threshold to 5 million.
So moved.
Support. Okay, so
Support.
all those in favor of the amendment to lower it to 5 million, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so we'll lower the threshold to 5 million.
City manager
And
has his
then, City manager, and then Commissioner Repart.
Without comment on your policy decision of the dollar amount, that's fine. But what I think you should pay attention to is Kara has said that at approximately 5 projects a year, she thinks she can handle it with the staff. By lowering it to 5 million, it sounds like you will double that number of projects potentially.
as we go.
And so I think that you ought to be considerate that if you do that, that's swell, but she may have a staffing issue which may cost money.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something I think that bridge we can cross when we get there. I mean, when I think of 30 projects over 5 years between 5 and 10, clearly this is not going to be something every project is interested in.
But imagine a dozen Grand Valley projects every year.
Well,
And if they all want to do a VEDA, I'll support that staff
Right,
ad
I
all
would-
day long.
Exactly, but I mean, the scale and scope of that project
I agree.
is, in my opinion, an outlier. And if this, I mean, truly, if this is something that people want to take advantage of, I agree, then it's time to, if we have 7 requests tomorrow, then that will come back to us as a conversation.
Exactly, we'll monitor and report back.
Yeah. Commissioner?
Commissioner had his hand for a while, so
No,
I'll...
I was actually just going to make the motion that
Oh,
Commissioner Allen
okay.
did, so I'm glad that it's.
Okay, great. Kira, I'm wondering too, as your team begin to work on these projects, maybe we can put together a template that would help developers so that it isn't staff heavy, that, there's something in place that could be, so even projects smaller than this, if someone wanted to have, okay, what are the steps that I need to follow in order to, have my own version of a VEDA? I think that would be great because I think it'll also help with your team in lessening the burden for them.
Certainly, we would like to probably identify the standard work, but know that each of these is going to be different in every given neighborhood, because you don't want to apply a cookie cutter approach to each, because then there's really no benefit for the neighborhood to participate other than to know what they're going to be asked or.
Yeah, but I think kind of knowing
The steps
what
in the
to pull
process.
together,
Right.
exactly.
The amount
Those
of
are the things I think
engagement.
you can.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever,
standard work.
because your team will likely follow a process themselves in order to make sure that it's done completely. So whatever those steps are, if something could be put in place where it's easy and accessible for developers.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So Commissioner O'Connor?
Yeah, I just, I feel like we have to, and Commissioner Lear brought this up about the previous policy, which was, we had just amended it less than a year ago, and it didn't work. And so what did? We monitored it, we realized it wasn't working, and we changed it. And so I think for us, it's okay in a lot of these discussions about housing stuff, some that we're having now and some that we're going to have in the next several weeks. We need to be willing to try some things with the understanding that if it doesn't work or it doesn't have the intended outcomes that we want, that we can change it. And not be afraid to, we need to make some changes. And we don't have all, we don't operate in a perfect world knowing all the potential pitfalls or negatives or positives that could come from it. And so as the NEZ policy wasn't working because no one took advantage of it because of the thresholds, this is the same policy. If it becomes to a point that it's too big or too out of control, we can amend it, or we can add staff. We have that purview, we have that budgetary authority, and if any of these other changes we make, we got to try something. To sit here and continue talking isn't doing us any favors. So let's be willing to try some things, and also be willing to admit when we might not make a perfect decision, and be willing to change.
Yeah. This is the messiness of public policy.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I feel like I have the mind of the commission, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. And then Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Kelly and any other commissioner want to raise their hand to have a conversation with Kara about other potential things we want to look at down the road to add to
We're
this.
more than happy to include whoever wants to.
Yeah,
go on.
I'll jump in on that.
Okay, Commissioner. Okay, so maybe Kara, over the next few weeks, you can set up a meeting with these three commissioners and take a little bit of a deeper dive and even identify some areas that we want to explore deeper, or we want to keep an eye on, or we want to revisit down the road.
Okay.
Just to clarify, we just approved it at 5 million.
We just approved it at 5 million, yeah, because the amendment passed. I should have clarified. For the record, thank you. So that passed with the amendment, reducing the threshold to 5 million. All right. Thank you. That takes us to our third one, and this is a resolution approving a new City Commission policy 900-56 entitled Property Partnership Policy.
So moved.
Triple P. Yeah, thank you. And this is recommendation number 7 from the Housing Advisory Committee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think this is your last Housing Advisory Committee policy for the morning to consider, and it is a mouthful of P's. I recognize that. So, but that's because it changed initially. You might recall it was a property acquisition and management policy, and it was geared toward the city individually seeking out property interests in order to increase its stock, if you will, of affordable housing. And then after feedback from the City Commission, the underlying premise of the policy changed to require that property interests be acquired only in the context of public and private partnerships with other entities. So again, you have actually the original version was attached to this as well as the revised version. It is not just a bunch of words that start with P. It really goes to the heart of state law, which allows municipalities more flexibility in the affordable housing arena in projects in which they hold property interests. So that's the gist of it. And it's really just the first step. I know it doesn't really spell out the process or anything, but again, it's just sort of formalizing one of the recommended approaches that came forth from the Housing Advisory Committee.
Great, thank you. All right, commissioners, questions, comments about this? It's a little bit more straightforward, Commissioner?
Again, I've been very vocal on this. I think this is important. To Commissioner Connor's comment on the last policy, we need to try something. And one of the things that we heard from several, at least 2 of the interviewees yesterday for city manager was, what you spend money on determines how you determine what, or indicates what you think is important. And I've always been saying that myself, that, what's important, look at how we spend our money. And if we're truly committed to affordable housing, we can leverage our ability to buy and hold property through strategic partnerships. We don't need to be the lead, but we certainly need to do that. I'll echo my wonder twin, Commissioner Lanier, on 28th Street,
I haven't heard that one.
28th Street, Alpine, and Plainfield. 3 corridors, each one in each ward, that have potential development opportunities for larger scale affordable housing. And I hope-
A2P, remember we
That's right.
shortened it, A2P.
So anyways, I just wanted to echo or voice my support for this.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right. Anyone else? Commissioner?
Well, I just wondered if the city manager wanted to talk about this. I know this is one you were very excited about, and tell us why.
Well, recall how this first came out of the Housing Advisory Committee. There were some who wished that the city could pass laws to make requirements of affordable housing on any project that was built by anybody, anytime, any place in the city. And although that might be a swell idea, it's not legal. And what is legal, and I hand it to the brilliance of our attorney here, is that if the city holds an interest, any interest, don't have to be full owner, you don't have to be a developer, but if we hold any interest in the property, then we have the ability to make extraordinary demands on the project, including affordability and anything else that you would wish. So although this may not be applicable in all cases, it has to be where we have an interest in the property. I think it can be very powerful, and we know that because in the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, they use this tool, and the city becomes a partner with interest in a property. They are able to put the kinds of restrictions that I think this commission may wish to put on projects, and they move forward. And so it's been very successful for them, and this is a tool that you can try out here.
Thank you.
Well said.
All right. Well said, City Manager. All right. Any other final? I suppose I should give our City Manager the final point on that one. All right. I'll call the question then. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, so we have one more item, and then Commissioners, I should remind you, the city attorney let us know this, I think, last week, but right after Committee of the Whole, we do have an executive session, and it's an executive session on property acquisition. And so stay put after this next discussion, and then please go directly down to 6th floor, City Attorney Law Library. Okay, so our next item, clear my throat so I don't cry, is to talk about the retirement of our city clerk and the process to move forward to work on the recruitment and interview to replace her. So I'll turn it over to, so Mayor Beth Jobs' HR department has been actively involved in this process since we were notified, and the city attorney's office has worked with us in the past. Many of you around this table remember that it was the HR department that took the lead when we hired our city treasurer, sitting right over there, Treasurer Globinski, but also in the past also with the city clerk and the city attorney, and so we are going to defer to our incredible expertise of our HR department and Mary Beth Jobs to help us with this process.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I was told by the executive session folks outside in the hallway to take my time so that you guys will approve whatever it is they're trying to pitch. Now, I of course won't do that, but that's what some of my colleagues out there were indicating. This is very straightforward. We do know our city clerk, our awesome city clerk, is retiring. And the prefacing remark I will say to you is I feel that the work she has done with the city clerk's office in terms of the classifications, the new classifications we've created, the reorganization of the clerk's office, the succession of various pockets of the functions of the city clerk's office, we are well suited to make this transition, and I do give a lot of that credit to the leadership of Darlene O'Neill, who is our awesome city clerk who's retiring. So it really makes my job much easier, actually, knowing that we have a high level of professional trained staff to carry on. And I want to just cover a few things on the schedule. You have the proposed schedule that I have. There are like 3 questions I need to get answers to with some clarity and definitiveness so that we can move forward, get the job posted tomorrow. As I indicated to you previously, there are like only 2 times in a year that you can effectively recruit a city clerk because of the cyclical nature of the elections. They don't abandon ship. They are committed to the end, which is great, but it leaves us with a very narrow window. This is one of those opportune times. You see a schedule that essentially commences, it would commence tomorrow. We would do a posting, a simple posting, and then we have a graphic posting that I'm going to have finally edited today that we would be putting out there. But the process should conclude if we execute it, which I would expect us to do. It should conclude with us being able to make an offer by the end of March. And I think that we can hit that target with approval today. Essentially, the 3 questions that have to be answered are, I recommend we have used subcommittee. It works very effectively. We will get a lot of applications, but not a lot of qualified applicants. And this is a much different recruitment process than, say, for example, the city manager. We need people who have some level of experience in elections, but we also need some other qualities that we need to target. And those are fairly easy to screen through. So my experience in doing city clerk recruitment is I think we will be able to nail what we need fairly quickly. That should reduce us down, as you see from the schedule, to maybe your top 4 to 6 candidates. And actually, with the first interview, what you're really screening for, you guys, is leadership capabilities, because they will already have election experience. And of course, we have election professionals in the department. But at that point, you're really screening for leadership expertise and experience. And so that will be the focus of that first interview. And then the second interview will really be you'll be seeking to screen out who's the best overall candidate. Okay, you'll have your election experience, the qualifications for that. You will have done some screening on the leadership. And so now who can really put it all together and be able to be the next city clerk is where we will provide some processes, hopefully, that will do an effective job of screening that out. So the 3 questions I have is, with definitiveness, having you indicate that you do want a subcommittee to work on the front end. I have a question about, I have March 22nd and March 29th. Are potentially 2 different interview dates. If we wanted to speed it up a week, we could do March 22nd. The reason I didn't do that is because I'm trying to use your off Tuesdays, the Thursdays, because you're so busy, and you have a meeting, I believe, on March 20th. And so if we set up an interview right behind that, depending on how exhausting that day is on the 20th, that could be problematic, and you're worn out and you don't want to talk to anyone, let alone candidates. So that's why I had originally put it at the 29th, but I do recognize that sometimes you feel compelled to just, let's get it done. And so that's a second question. And then I think the last question is about what I have it planned so that there will be a presentation to you in the final interview by the candidates. And that's very important because public speaking is invaluable in that position. And so there is a presentation aspect to it, and I will submit to you some ideas that I've used in other searches that I think will allow the candidates to pre-submit. What we like to do to keep things expedited is to let candidates know ahead of time, once they're selected for the interview, what they're going to be asked to submit as part of the portfolio. And so we'll have questions about race and equity. How can you more effectively engage the community in looking at all the clerks' functions through a race and equity lens and sifting that out? That might be a question that they should all present on, and maybe there's some others that we have. But doing a presentation, if you have, I'll send you the list of the questions for the presentations, and if you have other ideas, certainly I would be willing to entertain those. So essentially, it's an aggressive recruitment schedule. I think we can nail it within about 60 days, having someone selected for the position. I think the salary that we pay, and I'm very pleased that you all approved some adjustments to the salary a few years ago for a city clerk and for a couple other appointed officials, because we need to get the best and the brightest. That's what we've groomed. That's what that department has. And part of that is being competitive with the salary, and I think our salary is very competitive. So that's what I offer to you for discussion.
All right, I'll turn to my colleagues. Commissioner.
So I selfishly would like to select March 29th. I have a conflict for the 22nd, and I'd like to very much be at the second interviews. So,
I think all of you should be at the second interviews.
So if we could do the 29th, that would help me out a lot.
So commissioners, can we look at our schedules right now and make sure that that works for us on the 29th, and I can later on at least get a hold on a few hours on the 29th. Mm-hmm.
What's the time frame that we're looking at? Afternoon?
I think, well, I didn't know whether it's morning or afternoon, and we will ensure that it's placed on your calendar. I would anticipate it's probably no more than 3 candidates.
So plan for about 4 hours?
Yeah, we'll plan for 4 hours. We'll put a block. The morning or afternoon, does one of those work better?
Either are fine.
Okay. All right. So we'll work on that. Let's do afternoon, like noon to 4. Or 1 to 4.
1 to 4?
Or 1 to 5. Then we don't have to worry about lunch. Let's do 1 to 5 on the 29th.
Saving money.
Right. That's right.
That's funny, because I told my job shadow person, I said they are very innovative and creative, but they're all fiscally conservative. They do not want to spend any money. And he heard some of that today, so.
Okay, what were the other
the subcommittee
questions?
And subcommittee.
So, commissioners, that's what we've done in the past for city treasurer and city clerk, and even recently with city attorney. Are you comfortable with at least the initial vetting being a subcommittee to work with the HR department?
As long as I'm not on the subcommittee.
And I'd like to know who those, if I can know who those members are, that's helpful, because I'm not going to get that.
All right, so I'll serve on that. Do I have any volunteers?
I'll serve.
I've got Commissioner Lanier. One more. Kurt or Joe?
I'm all right.
I'm looking at your commissioner.
I'll do it. Yeah.
That was. I'm looking at the
That means he's happy to do so.
I'm happy to do
Welcome to the commission.
Right.
My senior commissioner and my newest commissioner. Perfect.
So like with our union, seniority matters.
All right, great. So,
And I think that's-
Mary Beth, and we can figure out our schedules
Yes.
and get a hold as well.
And then I'll send out today just some of the topics for the questions that we have.
Great.
And then you identify whether there's something different.
We'll do calendar invites, and then Mary Beth, I know you worked on a beautiful draft of a job posting.
Yeah.
If you need any additional feedback from us on that,
I don't
let us
think
know.
so. It needs some final edits, and then I have a couple of populated pictures of people. Commissioner Lanier has made a very excellent point. We should really showcase our people aspect of our community, because we are people-centered.
Excellent.
I do have a quick question about the posting. So Mary Beth, you indicated that something could be posted today and then there
Tomorrow, we would post the simple ad tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that would go to the municipal clerk associations. Keep in mind, knowing Michigan law is very important, so it's not a national search, it's a statewide. And some other sites we know to go to.
And so then after that, you would have a different posting that would be published?
No, we would just have the brochure prepared to go as well.
That's the
by
piece
the
I-
after, yeah.
that's the
by
piece
the
I
afternoon.
misunderstood. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Because some publications have prerequisites of time frames in which you need to get the information there.
Mm-hmm.
They can accept additional information, but you have to nail that time frame for advertisement, and so we're cognizant of that. We have all those dates and time frames, so.
Mm-hmm. All right. Can we send our great clerk around recruiting across the state? With all the relationships I'm sure she already has to
Yeah.
make sure we get some good candidates, please, clerk.
That's
mileage reimbursement, right? That's right, it is. I'm ready for that.
She'll be hired in the HR department as a recruiter.
Absolutely. We love talent. So those are my questions, commissioners. I think we're ready to roll with those answers, and we will report back. Obviously, at some point, we have to have a special meeting notices get set up, probably at your next commission meetings. So we'll have those pre-advance or whenever the clerks indicate we need to have that done. So thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thank
taking
you,
it
Mary
on,
Beth.
Mary
Thanks
Beth.
for your work on this. All right. Thank you. All right, next, commissioners, that's the end of this section of our agenda, but we do have an executive session. So can I get a motion to go in executive session?
Support.
All right, Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
O'Connor?
Yes.
Lynn? Yes. Kelly? Yes. Ellen?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so downstairs to the 6th floor law library.